It is nuts out there today. I just thought I'd share that with you guys.
In what way?
Like, it's like as if the markets just opened up after being closed like for a year. So it's just nuts. It's just hair bear out here. I don't even know why.
And it's so weird too. It's, it's become so hot, and I just, I put away all my fans. I'm like, "Ugh, now it's getting hot again." Oh, here's Howard Walensky and Jonathan Gregory. Oh, this is great. Okay, good, good, good.
All right, we'll give it another minute.
Okay.
And if we don't have quorum, we can't vote on anything, but
Okay.
we can still have a discussion.
We can sure talk about it.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
we can,
and hear from stakeholders.
yeah, we can storm the barricades some other time. All right. Well, hope Kelly comes back. Have you texted her or?
I'm texting her right now to see
Okay.
what's up.
All right, so we have Howard Walensky and Jonathan Gregory stakeholders. Do you think, Catherine, since we have so few people, we could enable them to be panelists?
I don't think that's really appropriate because they are not members of the committee, but we can certainly allow them to
Speak a lot. Okay.
speak.
Okay. All right. So if Howard and Jonathan didn't hear, we're giving it a minute and then we're going to start. We don't have quorum. We had quorum momentarily, but we lost it when our person fell off the call. So.
And I don't believe that I have Ren's phone number.
Neither do
Kevin.
why.
All right, well, we got Nick, so we have made it to quorum.
Oh, good. All right.
Potentially have Kelly back. We'll find out.
Every time I sit down in front of my computer, it's like this child comes for feeding. I forget what I'm doing.
That's automatic.
Right. Hey, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Hear you.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
Great. Aye.
Awesome. Well, I feel like we have quorum now, so I will call the meeting to order at 6:37 p.m.
Okay.
Do a quick attendance. Catherine is here. Tess,
Here.
Kelly,
Here.
Nick,
Here,
Sean. Did we lose
Here.
Sean?
Sorry,
Thank you.
I'm in the store, so I'm going to mute myself. So it might take a little time to get back on, but I'm here.
Yeah, no. Thanks so much, Sean. And we do not have Ren and Kevin right now, but hopefully they'll be able to join us
Okay.
shortly. So we'll lead off with the minutes, review and approve the committee minutes. Motion A, approve the GTLNC September 7th, 2021 Governmental Affairs Committee minutes. Do I have a first?
Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly. And do I have a second?
Tess.
Thank you so much, Tess. Any discussion on the minutes?
Very comprehensive and appreciated.
All right. I see a hand from Jonathan. You should be able to unmute.
Hi, thank you, Catherine. I wanted to point out that in the minutes that there is an inaccuracy, and I'll spend my time, I'm going to go right to it and do things as quickly as I can, not waste time because no one likes that. The importance of it is having to do with the president nominating people, different positions. There are two things I really don't like about these bylaws. It has to do with too much power in the hands of the president, which is who makes the agenda, and all of these people the president nominates. I wanted to use my time to say, Catherine, you made a good argument saying that it's like the president nominating someone on the Supreme Court or in a committee, but it really isn't, because when the president nominates, for example, the youth member, that youth member votes. So if the president was nominating someone to Congress, the representative body, then it would be similar to the situation we have here. So I don't like it at all. I think it's a perversity in the bylaws. And if you look, I'm going to tell you where it is, but it's in the minutes, when this point is being addressed, it says the bylaws currently say the president selects who the board gets to vote on. That's not what the bylaws say. I'm not disputing actually the quality or anything like that, but if you're going to quote the bylaws, then, or if you're going to say what the bylaws say, you have to say what the bylaws say. And what you can look it up, or I'll tell it to you now, however you want to deal with it. But it actually says one youth member to be nominated by the president and approved by a majority of vote of the board members. So that's what actually should be there, rather than saying the bylaws say something it doesn't say, even though what you wrote may mean the same thing. Thank you.
Jonathan, may I ask for clarification? On what page of the meeting minutes are you?
Okay.
Are you referring to?
It's the minutes we're talking about, September 7th. Go down to number 6, where it says ongoing business, then go to part C, open questions.
Okay,
And
hold on,
it's
6, ongoing business, part C. Okay,
and then it's the second paragraph.
got it. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Catherine, was that clear?
I mean, I understand the concern. I will say the minutes are a reflection of what was said at the meeting, not necessarily a direct quote from the bylaws. So, and I honestly don't recall now. I probably was the one that said that, but that was basically a paraphrase of the bylaws. And I understand and appreciate the request for specificity, but it has the exact same meaning, because your concern, as you've said, is that the president nominates someone and the board votes on them, which is the same as the president selects who the board gets to vote on. So I guess I'm not quite understanding the concern about the fact that it's a similar meaning, but not a direct quote from the bylaws. Nor does it say it's a quote, like it doesn't have quotation marks in the minutes.
If you want to leave it that way, it's not worth arguing about, but I believe that in this organization, the bylaws are grossly underestimated and not referred to. So I think it's only helpful that if one says what the bylaws say what the bylaws say. But I understand what you're saying, and it's not a disputable fact. However you want, I just wanted to call it to your attention that that's not actually what they say. And you're correct. I think I don't think there's anything intentional going on. So I'm happy to move on. I just think only what I said. I'm not going to repeat myself. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments on the minutes? All right, hearing none, seeing none, let's proceed to a quick vote. All right, on motion A to approve the September 7th minutes, how does everyone vote? Tess,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yeah.
Nick,
Yep.
and Sean.
And yes, sorry.
Thank you so much. I am a yes as well. Motion carries 5-0-0. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm just writing this down in my minutes. All right. Next up on the agenda is public comment. So any members of the public that would like to speak, I know it says on this agenda 2 minutes. We're going to do 3 minutes, but if you have something you'd like to make a public comment on related to governmental affairs, but that is not on the agenda, please go ahead and raise your hand. And keep in mind, if it is bylaws or standing rules related, that is on the agenda. All right. Let's see, I see Jonathan's hand up. I think, yeah, you already can mute or unmute yourself. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Okay, thank you. What I would like, it's not on the agenda, so I'll put it here. What I would like to raise is what took place at the general board meeting, which was this proclamation of some sort on who the grievance committee is. I don't know what you're going to do with it. I wrote a letter. I don't think that that's adhering to the bylaws. So I'm questioning the whole nature of the bylaws. I mean, the relationship to the bylaws is, if an organization has bylaws, anything I've ever seen before is people refer to them and they use the bylaws to guide them through the operational, everything they do. The bylaws are the core of the organization. They're the only thing that bring the people together upon which we agree.
Jonathan, I want to
Supposedly.
reiterate that the bylaws are on the agenda further
No, I'm not
down.
talking about the bylaws. I'm talking about the relationship to the bylaws. In other words, this
That
has
is
to do
about
with,
the bylaws.
pardon?
If it's the relationship to the bylaws, it's about the bylaws.
Where would you like this comment to go? It's not on any, I looked through the
There's a
agenda.
grievance committee section under the
Maybe.
bylaws. That might be a good place.
Okay, we'll wait.
All right. Any other public comments not on an agenda item? All right. Any committee member news and announcements? Any updates from committee members?
I don't know if this is appropriate for government affairs, but we have a neighborhood cleanup on Saturday, October 9th, and we are starting up our neighborhood watch meetings again on November 15th. And I can provide any details to folks who may have an interest. And that's it.
All right. Great. Any other committee member news and announcements? Hearing none, seeing none. Ongoing business. And I'll hand it over to Tess to talk about our LA City Council redistricting.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. So I will say that a month ago, there was far less discussion and interest in redistricting than there is today, 1 month later. And I believe at the last meeting, Government Affairs Committee meeting, we discussed putting forward a community impact statement. At the time, it was agreed that one wasn't needed or, you know, desirable or useful. And I don't know if that may or may not have changed. I just put that out there. But the redistricting has really heated up. There was an article in the LA Times last, I believe, Thursday, September 30th, if I'm not mistaken. And what we have now is, at least where Toluca Lake is concerned, in the greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council District, is whether we're going to end up with Paul Krikorian or Nithya Raman. And in fact, literally 10 minutes before this meeting started, I received a redistricting alert from Paul Krikorian's office because I'm on his email list along with several other city council members. And so there is some debate right now about which council member will prevail and get Toluca Lake. So this certainly affects us and something that we should be aware of. And I've spoken to several experts about the redistricting, including one who is with us tonight, Howard Walensky, who may have a comment or two. But in short, what's happened is, as of last week, draft K2 was adopted by the Redistricting Commission, and they rejected draft L, which happens to be supported by Nuri Martinez, president of the LA City Council. And what we have found in the interim is that draft L was written by Paul Krikorian's people, partly to unify the Armenian population in the Valley in that district, and partly to sort of preserve the status quo of current redistricting. So what it does, it challenges and undermines the Valley principle, which is that the entire commission had agreed to the Valley by population being the equivalent of 5 2/3 of a council district. So the Valley should have 5 complete council districts and 2/3 of a council district, which would be Krikorian's district, as I understand it. But some say, of course, also that this should be Nithya Raman's district. So that is what remains to be seen. I don't know that I need to go further into the weeds on that, but certainly we have an interest in which council member we end up with, whether it's Nithya Raman or Paul Krikorian. And we know also, as of, I believe, 2 weeks ago, that Paul Krikorian has now officially moved into Toluca Lake, where he owns a home. And so that certainly thickens the plot somewhat. So that's what I have for redistricting. The meetings are continuing, and I believe those meetings are listed here in the meeting minutes and in the agenda. People can see the timeline at the LACCRC2021.org website. The Los Angeles Redistricting Commission meetings are ongoing. And of course, whatever the commission decides, the Los Angeles City Council can overrule them because the Redistricting Commission is advisory only. So I'm very interested to see how all of this will shake out, particularly as it pertains to Toluca Lake and our neighboring council district. That's my update.
Thank you. Any discussion, any questions? Go ahead, raise your hand if you're a member of the public.
Oh,
Or if you are on the committee, feel free to speak.
yeah, I can't tell you how much I hear about how difficult our lives are made by the fact that we sit with the district that we do, and the fact that we're sliced up the way that we are. And I can't think of a single reason why we wouldn't want to be in the Valley. I don't know Krikorian well. I don't know Nithya well either. But if it's certainly up to my vote, and I certainly think we should take a stance on it, I say we do whatever we can to stay in the Valley, because it's just, if you hear what some of these people deal with the homeless issue, as far as just getting consistent services between the two to coordinate cleanups, let alone outreach services to homeless themselves, it's a huge hurdle. So
Nick, I don't believe that we would fall out of the Valley. I think really.
No. I'm just saying, I mean, I would just say I would want the Valley in the Valley, or, I mean, I guess, what are the options? I don't even know what the options are.
Well, the districts are being carved up as we speak. I will forward you the latest maps that I literally got 15 minutes ago momentarily,
Right.
and you can see what they are. There's also redistricting maps at the website. But I think the most important thing, which is partly what you're saying, is for the sake of expedient city services, that our entire council district be entirely in the Valley and not split between the Valley and the West Side as it is now. I believe that would be
East side, yeah.
advantageous, at least from a services point of view, if not for other reasons as well.
Yeah, and I would just caution all committee members, it's great to have a discussion about the value of not having a district spread all the way from the Valley to the south of Koreatown, when those are such different needs. But let's not talk about who the city council members are or who we would want to represent us, because that gets into politics.
Okay.
And we are not a political body.
Well, no, we're not. Although, I think it needs to be said that it's, between Raman and Krikorian. And while I won't state a preference, I'm not even sure that I have one. Watching what those two do in the next week or 2 or 3 is going to be illuminating, and how this shakes out. So
I have a question.
go ahead.
Isn't it now? Are we allowed to, not necessarily as an individual, but as a body, have an opinion on what we want for our constituents? Are we allowed to have an opinion? Let's say if everyone, all of a sudden, every single Toluca Lake person decided to say, you know what, we all want Krikorian. And at that point, is it incumbent on us to then go to the council and say, hey, according to our
We
constituency,
cannot say we want a specific council member. We can request to be in a specific council district.
and that's, and I misspoke.
because-
I didn't mean that. I apologize.
Okay.
Just for clarity.
Yeah, that's what I want to distinguish between requesting to be in CD4 versus CD2, as opposed to requesting to be in Krikorian's district or Mithya Raman's district.
Versus, oh yeah, precisely. And
Yeah.
to me, my personal opinion, I think being in the valley with the valley makes more sense. Because again, like Tess stated, there are like, and as well as you stated, the needs of Koreatown are substantially different than the needs from the people in the valley. And logistically, that also makes sense because people having to come over the hill to do stuff when they're based on the other side of the hill also doesn't make sense. I'm just trying to maybe be water least path of resistance. So I just wanted to see if it was, maybe we don't necessarily do a community impact statement, but maybe we should, do some type of straw poll to see if there's any preference that people have being in CD4 versus CD2 and try to keep politics out of it. Is that something worth investigating, or is it too late for that because they're about to vote on it anyways?
Well, and I guess that's a question for you, Tess. Do we even have time to produce a community impact statement knowing that we can't write one to vote on this evening?
I'd have to check the schedule. I can let you know by the end of the meeting.
Thanks.
Possibly, but I think a straw poll is certainly, well, if we can't write a community impact statement, then it might be moot. But I've certainly gotten probably close to 20 questions about redistricting between last month and this month, which is, a pretty hot topic considering nobody seemed to have much to say about it prior to that, is all I'm saying. So, and I've attended the hearings and been reading the updates as they've been coming in. So I'll check and let everybody know before the end of the meeting.
Thanks. I see Howard, you have your hand up. Go ahead. You might need to unmute. Yeah.
Howard.
Hi, I'm Howard Walensky from Toluca Lake. I live on Bloomfield Street. I've been following the redistricting process pretty closely, and just a couple of points to make. There are 4 public hearings between the next, I believe, 2 weeks, including one tomorrow night. And then the commission will adopt the final map, which will be a recommendation to the city council. Presently, the Toluca Lake district is labeled 2 or 4, and a district in the western part of the valley, central part of the valley, is also listed 2 or 4. So I think it is relevant to advocate for what district Toluca Lake should be in. Very likely, whatever happens, it will largely be a valley district. But the question of what district number we have is obviously very important. Thank you.
Yes, and I agree, Howard. Thank you for that. So if our next board meeting is on the 19th of October, and assuming that we discussed and agreed tonight to have a community impact statement, let's see, would we have time to get it in on it?
I mean, honestly, it looks like the adoption schedule says the 21st. So that would be cutting it very close. And we'd have to hold a special meeting in order to pass the community impact statement within the governmental committee.
Right.
Well, we don't have to. There's not actually a rule that we have to pass a CIS in a committee first, but we would ideally give people the chance.
Catherine, has this been done before? Could we, is this, you know,
I was not involved 10 years ago, so I do not know.
well, I'm going to ask a technical, you know, a procedural question. Could we ask the board in an email whether they would like to?
No,
No, okay.
because that gets into Brown Act violations. You're
Yeah, I was
discussing
wondering.
potential board business,
Okay.
not in a public setting. Yeah.
Okay. But we could hold a special meeting at any time.
Mhm.
It's just a matter of how strongly does the community feel about this? But I think Howard is right. I mean, where we end up is really important. So how do we determine that? Should we do a special issue of the newsletter?
We got, this is, I mean, this is as important as it gets, I think, doesn't it? I mean, I think anything we got to do to weigh in on this is awfully important. I think this is like, I mean, for me, just trying to get those underpasses dealt with, having one person to go with is just monumentally 1,000 times solve so many problems. I just want to know anybody who wants to stay in CD2 versus coming, or stay into CD4 versus coming into 2. And I think it's a relatively easy thing that we can all agree on. I don't know if what the board and everybody here would think, but I just think this is really critical, and I think it's something we need to move on relatively quickly. And I am sort of upset that we're not a little bit more ahead of it. But if we were, to,
I mean,
if they
why
were to,
don't we do a newsletter, include a survey in the newsletter that goes out this week, and you know, have people
Can we put something on
respond.
Facebook?
yeah, let's see if we can get a Facebook poll going.
And Nick, Nick, I agree that it's important, but a month ago, when we floated the idea of a community impact statement in this committee, the vote was no. So just so you're aware, I'm not sure if you were here last month or not.
I think that was more so because of the timeline. We just didn't feel it was possible to do.
I didn't realize. I must have been out to lunch on that vote.
Well, I also think we didn't know, you know, this is Kelly, that we didn't know what the changes were being proposed a month ago.
I think that was more the case.
That's the difference.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would propose that we do a newsletter, have a poll, put it out on social media and see how people feel about it. And then put together a community impact, you know, a special meeting or community impact statement, as the case may be, depending on the feedback. I think it's important too.
We're the vote to be held today, and your pulse is pretty on this. Where do we land? Do you know? Do you have any sense of that?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking anyone, but yeah, I was asking you. Anyone that knows with
The
that.
general sentiment is to be in the valley, for all districts the general sentiment is not to split our district between the valley and the west side as it is now, or shall we say the other side of the hill.
The east side, yeah.
And I do think that in the maps, there's a little bit that would go onto the other side of the hill.
Where?
Into Hollywood, I believe, in one of the samples. I haven't seen the most recent ones test, so this might be different, but the ones that were circulated a couple weeks ago, you know, there were a little bit going into Hollywood, but it didn't stretch all the way down south into Koreatown.
If you go to the Los Angeles Times, October 1st, there is a map. That's the latest map. It's the October 1st LA Times. LA Redistricting Panel approves draft map.
And it's also on the redistricting website. So
yeah, I was looking at that, but it doesn't. It's like right there. Yeah, okay. There we go. Okay, 4 days ago. Perfect. Okay.
So I have just sent to everybody I forwarded the alert that I just got from Paul Krikorian just moments before this meeting started. So that has some of the maps in it that we could look at.
Yeah. So this one right now, it goes up and sort of like goes around Sun Valley, down through North Hollywood, covers Toluca Lake, parts of the Hollywood Hills, Griffith Park, and Hollywood Hills West, going to the border of West Hollywood. And it doesn't actually go into Hollywood, it looks
It
like.
just doesn't, that's not in Hollywood. I'm looking at the map right now. That's not in Hollywood.
It's not Hollywood proper, but it's like the north part of Hollywood where like the Hollywood Bowl is and stuff.
Right. I mean, it's the same. I mean, it's part of the same issue, right? So it looks like they're drawing the one line on the 101, right? So you're still going to get stuck with that same. Well, no, I guess it's the 134. Now you're going to have some issues with CD3. This map is a terrible quality that I'm looking at from the LA Times website. I can't like see down to the street level or whatever. But no, I just want the valley to be in the valley. I don't want any part of Hollywood to be over here. It's not. Sorry. Well, it is what it is. I mean.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a way to, I'll tell you what one of my concerns is. My concern is that I don't want Toluca Lake to be an island that doesn't have shared demographics with other parts of whatever council district we're in. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
I agree. I don't think that's going to happen, but go ahead, Kelly.
That's it. I feel like that we're better off in the one that's 2 or 4 that goes into Sunland and includes the Hollywood Hills.
Yeah.
Is actually in my sense of it more in alignment than the one that's 2 or 4 that's sort of Winnetka.
Right.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think that this is
Well, and can I just clarify on this map? I think they're just, so the 2 or 4, they just haven't decided which one is getting named 2 and which one is getting named 4 for that. So we're at no risk of being over with Winnetka and Reseda. Like that's not.
right. Okay.
Well,
So what used to be Council District 4 is just not even remotely on this map now. Like where we are currently should be stretching all the way down into parts of 5 and 10, you know?
right, but that's, yeah, I get that, but my point is, if you look at the map, I would rather the Toluca Lake, Greater Toluca Lake area stay with the Hollywood Hills 2 or 4, then go to the Krikorian 4 or 2 that's further to the west.
Well,
No, that's not an option though. That's not going to happen.
let's.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is.
Is it?
It could.
Wait, no. Those are there'll be 2 different districts, right? Or what are you saying? Am I mishearing what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that my understanding is that Krikorian could we could be, whether we're 2 or 4, like, aren't we that, okay, never mind. I misunderstand. I thought that they were going to be combining this
No.
2 or 4 with other existing things, but you're
No,
saying.
No, they're independent. It's either
Got it.
2 or 4. Now the question is, so Nithya Raman could end up being could end up being in Winnetka, and we could end up.
But here's the thing here's the question I have about it.
So crazy.
If you look at it, couldn't it be like, let's say that we stay 4, okay? And that includes the Hollywood Hills and it goes into Sunland, like they've redrawn it. But then also, can't the other light blue 4 or 2 also become 4?
No.
No, that would be, one would become 4 and one would become 2.
Got it.
Like they're just trying to decide which one will be named which, because as you can tell from this, what was Council District 4 is not remotely on this map anymore.
Correct.
Can
Well, there's a little bit of an overlap. There's a little.
Yeah.
CD2 would also be not CD2
Very
really
different,
doesn't
yeah.
violate this. I mean, it doesn't even exist. We're
Well,
moving TV2 from Studio City to Winnetka. I mean,
guys,
anyway,
we have a stakeholder question, and I'd also like to ask Howard Walensky his opinion, because as he said, he's been following this very closely.
yeah,
Maybe
I
we
would
can
love
go
that.
to stakeholder Jonathan Gregory and then to Howard.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, thank you. What I would add to this conversation is something Nick is saying, and I don't know if it's being clearly understood. Nick's saying something really important. And I looked up the definition of a CIS while you were talking. I don't think opinions are very valuable. What I do think are really important are definitions and facts. If you look up the CIS, it's explaining to the neighborhood council that it's the mechanism that the board communicates to the government, the city government, its position. And that means the board is the body that's best outfitted to look at how is this working for our neighborhood? Because there are certain things that are not working at all. And Nick has put his finger right on one of them without going into it. He's saying, I think if I'm understanding him, is that the board is really well outfitted to take a look back and say what works best for Toluca Lake and what greater Toluca Lake and what doesn't work, and make a choice. Let the board members, it's not a poll of the community so much because you can't take votes. There's no time, but it's really, really important, like Nick said, to try to navigate into the council district that best serves greater Toluca Lake. Thank you.
I think Howard, go ahead, Howard.
Can I be heard?
Yes, you can.
All right, I thought I needed to be unmuted again. A couple of things. Other neighborhood councils have delivered orally their community impact statements at prior commission meetings.
Mhm.
They usually get 3 minutes at the beginning of the meeting when the commissioners are kind of fresh and probably a little more attentive. Whereas everyone else gets 1 minute. And sometimes that 1 minute can last, the speakers can last an hour and a half. And it obviously neighborhood councils are considered very important. When they did the redistricting, they wanted to keep neighborhood council districts together as much as they could. So they have a lot of respect for the opinions of neighborhood councils. And lastly, the last public hearing is October the 16th. So that would be your last opportunity to deliver a community impact statement if that's what you want to do. And last, there's basically now one draft map that the commission could slightly modify, but probably won't make big modifications. And so we're in that district, as I think was pointed out. It's a question of which councilman will represent which district, and it's down to the two that have been discussed. So it's possible, although I think unlikely, that Krikorian could end up in the West Valley, and we could be represented by Nithya Raman. Okay. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's just my opinion on what the tea leaves suggest. And one more thing. There appears to be some city council persons who opposed the K through 2.5 map and support an alternative map, which the commission considered and rejected. But as far as I understand, nothing stops the council from ultimately adopting that other map, which would be, it's referred to as Plan L, as in Larry. Toluca Lake is still along in the valley along with Studio City, but it's configured differently, and I believe the the hillside areas that are in it now are eliminated. And I think the district goes into North Hollywood and is a little more of a valley district. Thank you.
Okay,
So I think maybe we should move on from this for this evening. But I do have a question, which is at what point would these actually take effect? Because we keep talking about, oh, CD2 versus CD4 and which representative will end up being in it. But, you know, if a representative doesn't qualify within a district, I don't think they still get to retain their seat just because they were the CD4 representative. Like, would these take effect for the upcoming election?
It goes into effect January 1st, and it doesn't matter who was elected to represent which area.
yeah, in other words, if one of the other council members inherit a district in which nobody voted for them, they would still be that council district's council member. I believe that's correct. Is it not, Howard?
Yes.
Mhm.
Both Krikorian and Rahman were elected in 2020. And so they are up, well, Krikorian is term limited. So he finishes his city council career in 2024. But Rahman, presently the district that that Toluca Lake is in does not include where she lives, which is in Silver Lake. Previously, someone said that Krikorian is moving into Toluca Lake, which I know everyone understands to be a fact, apparently, which is.
It is.
So, but they can continue if this district is called 4, we'd be represented by Rahman, even though she doesn't live in the district until 2024. And then if she wanted to run, she has to move into the district. There's been past, Ruth Galanter is the historical precedent. She represented an area around Culver City, and toward the end of her career, her district was moved into the valley as the valley became more populous. And so she just represented the district in the valley.
Okay.
Catherine,
Thank you.
When you say that we can't discuss politically who these people are, is that why?
We are an apolitical body.
Right.
So you
But-
can
so it doesn't-
discuss whether or not you feel that a council member has been responsive. But I would generally caution everybody that is a board member or a committee member when it comes to discussing a preference for one person over another.
Is that, I'm not questioning it, but what's the authority on that? Do you know, Council?
Yeah, punishable by what?
Well,
I
Like,
don't know exactly what it's punishable by, but
Tradition, or is it
it's-
like I get a call from the city attorney if I discuss one or the other? Like,
so I can tell you right now that if you are a government employee, and we've all heard this at our meetings when people have talked about, asking someone to respond to recall effort questions. If you are working for the city and you're on city time, then you are not allowed to do anything political. Like you're not allowed to speak about something political on city time. You're not allowed to campaign. You're not allowed to do anything like that. And so while we are not city employees, we are a sort of gray area of representatives within the city governance. And so I think we should generally adhere to that rule that we are on city time right now. and so we shouldn't be political.
Okay.
Well,
Let me tell you,
CD2 is very-
I'm pretty political.
Yeah, no, so am I. I'm incredibly political, but CD2 is very responsive. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
All right, I think we should move on from this.
Well, before we do, Catherine, can we decide whether to, I think we've heard that there's interest in taking a position here. And I think we should do something. We should communicate at one of these hearings or put together a community impact statement, even if it would require a special meeting. I think it's important.
All right, I think that sounds good. Do we want to also do a poll of the community to put something out? We can get it circulating on social media before the newsletter goes out and include it in the newsletter on Thursday, and set a deadline for the results so that they are before whenever we hold a special meeting. Does that sound reasonable so that we can get a little bit of information on how the public feels?
I think so. Any
Okay.
objection? Nick, Sean, Kelly?
No, I that's initially what I suggested. I think we
Okay.
need to find out what the people want.
All right.
I mean,
I-
we are elected to be representatives and make decisions for the people. It's not a direct democracy, but yes, I think asking what we want is fine. But at the end of the day, that representative democracy does mean that, we're elected to make some decisions. And I think this is one of them if we're in that much of a crunch. But if we have the time, yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Are we ready to move on, Tess?
Yes. Does this require a motion or we just decided that we're going to do?
We can't do a motion. It's not agendized.
Okay.
So we're just going to proceed with putting together a poll
Okay.
that can circulate on social media. Tess, you and I can coordinate with Robin on making sure, our secretary, on making sure that gets up.
Okay.
All
right.
And request a special meeting, or not a special meeting of the board, but we'll need to figure out among the committee when people are available to do a special meeting so that we can
Okay.
vote on the CIS, because we cannot vote tonight. It's not agendized.
Okay.
All right. California is also doing statewide redistricting. It's being done by the Independent California Citizens Redistricting Commission, which, as it says, is independent. It is not something that will ultimately be voted on by the legislature, like the LA City Council District redistricting will be.
Mhm.
But you can participate if you go to wedrawthelinesca.org. wedrawthelinesca.org.
Okay.
Learn how you can make comments on that.
Good. All right. So unless there are any more comments, I think we can wrap up redistricting and move along.
Mhm.
Okay. So on the agenda, let's see. We're going to go through the remaining points. I think we could probably knock them out this evening on the bylaws. So just to bring people up to speed, you see some bullet points there on the agenda. And what I want to do is continue as we did last month, that we share this time together to come up with concerns, ideas on the different sections of the bylaws, what changes we may want, what's desirable, what's not desirable. And I think we should be able to present a first draft of the revised bylaws, hopefully by the next meeting. Catherine, do you think that's feasible?
Yes, I would love to see us with a draft of the bylaws and maybe even a general outline for standing rules. But for sure, I'd like us to get the bylaws moving forward.
Very good, very good. So our goals tonight are just to throw out ideas. We don't need to belabor things too much, but just to get everybody's thoughts on these bullet points. And I believe with the last meeting, we left off with, let me look, so sorry, I have so many documents open right now.
Yeah, I can put up the agenda if that's helpful at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have it in front of me, but I just had 10 other documents open as well. So I think what we got as far as the,
So we've got committee creation and authorization, including the selection of chairs is the first item up on continuing the list.
okay, so committee creation, including ad hoc and authorization. And if people have the bylaws up, yeah, I think that would be helpful. Any thoughts, ideas, comments on that?
I will make a very quick recommendation to put this in the standing rules to define a lot of that. That would be my personal recommendation, so that if we discover something is cumbersome or not working, we have the opportunity to change it.
Okay.
Um,
I have no objection to that. And just to review for people who may not have been here last month, the standing rules are much easier to alter and don't require the assent or approval of Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, and therefore gives us a bit more flexibility. So do we have any comments on that? Okay, I guess not. Hearing none, seeing none. Moving on to the next item, which is agenda setting. Yes, I think this is important. All right, so agenda setting. Anyone?
I see
All right.
Jonathan's hand.
Okay, what I'd like to point out is that this is the most essential in my opinion, in my point of view, having to do with the bylaws. The second most essential is the nomination shtick. But on this point, setting the agenda, to be right to the point, is I think it's very important that it, in a sense, replicate what I've already said before, like North Hollywood Northeast, where any board member has the ability to place something on the agenda in order to be representative. It's already built into the parliamentary procedures that if a board member places something on the agenda, it cannot be discussed if some other board member doesn't second it. So it goes dead right there if it's on the agenda and not at least two board members are willing to talk about it. So all of this stuff about having perusals by other committees and approvals, and it's all complicating something that it shouldn't be complicated. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right.
I just want to throw out there that there was a previous suggestion that, you know, if some neighborhood councils have something where a board member needs to sponsor each item on an agenda, or, you know, if we wanted to set it up to say that X number of board members are required in order to sponsor an item that's not part of, you know, a committee report or something. If people are concerned about agendas getting bloated or something.
Well, I think that's a good measure. Catherine, I think my preference would be to give more openness to agenda setting. And if we do find that agendas start getting bloated, then we make that adjustment. So
I will also say, I think that we should clarify, because right now our bylaws mainly appear to be speaking to the governing board rules, but not necessarily to what the rules are within committees. And I think it would be valuable to include agenda setting processes for a committee as well, because I know I've heard from members of other committees that are confused or concerned about how the agenda for the committee they're on is being set, and whether or not they as committee members have a say in that.
well, and I believe they should have a say. I mean, if you're a committee member, then, you know, don't you agree?
Oh yeah, I personally agree. I think we should make sure that when we're writing this, we're clarifying what applies to governing board, what applies to committees, what applies to both. Because right now, everything feels like it applies to the governing board, but doesn't
Yes.
necessarily clearly apply to a committee.
That's a good point, but how would it differ between the committee and a board member placing an item on the agenda?
Well,
Other
we
than-
just clarify, like, a board member can place an item on the governing board agenda. A member of a committee can place an item on a committee agenda. you know,
Okay, I
or
mean,
something like that.
Yeah, I can live with that. All right, good.
I actually, I forgot one thing. I wanted to jump back to the committee authorization. And I don't know if this is the committee section is where it should be, or if it should live somewhere else, but we talked about whether or not board members ought to be required to be on at least one committee. Because I don't believe have that requirement anywhere in our bylaws right now.
Yes.
Yes, I think so. I think that would be important.
I would like to find a way to increase engagement, because I feel like there are 6 or 7 of us that do everything. Well, no, you know what? Never mind. I'm not gonna say that.
No,
I
you're
would
right,
just
Nick.
like-
I think you're right.
I
That's true.
I don't want to make it a I don't, like I said, I don't want to make it a political thing, but I feel like that there is, this is the group project in high school, and there are half people doing all the work, and any way we can change that, I think is really important. There are people on this board, I don't even know who they are. I have no idea what their names are. Like I see their picture and I'm like, I don't know who that is. So, I'm very much in favor of this, and anything we can put in the bylaws to increase participation with the board members is something that I am 300% in favor of. Any ways we can think of to do that, that would be lovely, but I think it's a great start.
Nick,
Only 300%?
yeah.
All right, I'm sorry, I jumped back to that. Was there anything else on agenda setting?
Sorry, did Jonathan have his hand up, or are we going to the next item?
I just lowered it.
Okay.
It's still up.
Wait,
Okay.
I want to say something about agenda setting, which might not, I don't know, if you don't think it should go here, then we can, table it for something else. But 2 things. One is that I believe individual board members should be able to add things to the agenda. And then the second piece is motions, which I don't know if that, again, is maybe a separate bullet, but, we have a tradition that a motion has to be voted on in committee before it can be added to a board agenda, a board meeting agenda. But that's just a tradition. That's not hard and fast, and it causes problems sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's one of the things that we should consider is whether or not items need to originate in a committee. Some neighborhood councils have that in their bylaws or in their standing rules, but we can make it clear that it is not a requirement.
Yeah,
Interesting. Okay.
I don't think it should be.
So, and that's not in our bylaws now, it's just tradition. Okay, right. So
Yeah.
how do the other board members feel about that? Nick, Sean? No comments from Nick and Sean? Okay.
Sorry, I'm still, you gotta bear with me as I take myself off mute and pull my phone out of my pocket. I think we should. I think that, I've said this from the beginning. I think that we should all have the ability to bring up, agenda. I don't think it should be just left to one
Well,
individual.
hold on, Sean.
I'm sorry.
Sean, there's no disagreement on that. It's, do you think an item should be agendized first in a committee before it can go to the general board? That's the
No,
question.
not necessary. I think that if a constituent brings up something, or if it's out of committee, I don't see why not. If
Okay.
it's a concern to
Okay.
anyone, then it should be a concern to all.
Right,
Why
okay.
was that put in place in the first place?
I don't know. Kelly might know, I don't. That's tradition. I haven't.
My impression in the last 2 terms is that it was used as a way to, used as a way to kind of control things, to just keep it so that you couldn't move quickly on something because you'd have to wait till the committee met and it was on it was formally agendized for the committee and voted on before it could then go to the next board meeting.
Yeah, I think we should take out that speed bump. I mean, if
Yeah,
there's a reason, if there's a reason to take our time, we can do that, but we shouldn't be constrained by an artificial mechanism like that. So yeah, that should be
Is this-
clarified.
There's a statement that I hate. It's called moving at the speed of government. Man, I hate that statement. So
All right.
anything you can do to
Good. All right. So I think
Right.
we're agreed on that. Let's move to the next item and roll here.
Reconsideration.
Reconsideration. So currently the bylaws on reconsideration. Is there anything?
Any stakeholder may petition the council to reconsider any matter on which the council has previously taken an action. Now, in this, it says it must be submitted in writing prior to the regular meeting of the council following the meeting at which the council action was taken. However, I would propose reducing that timeline for two major reasons. One, so that if there is something that needs to be taken action on more quickly to be reconsidered, it can be done. And two, if it can be up to the next regular meeting, there's not really an opportunity to properly agendize and notice that in adhering to the Brown Act. So I would propose within 10 days of the action. At a minimum, I think we should say it needs to be greater than 4 days before the next meeting to allow us time to agendize this request.
Yeah, that makes sense in order to remain compliant with the Brown Act. Okay,
Sure.
at least 4
Yeah.
days prior to the next general board meeting. Okay.
I would also add, and I'm not sure like what the mechanism would be, but I know that in the past, there have been requests for reconsideration that were put onto board agendas, but had never really been shared with all board members.
Mhm.
So they were private requests for reconsideration that were acted on. And I think that there should be some sort of mechanism where requests for reconsideration have to be shared with all board members.
I
I like that.
1000% agree, because I think there's some overstepping of authority here in some instances that I've observed that has to do with withholding information. And I don't know that it's deliberate or not, but it's not good. Yeah. So any reconsideration has to be brought to the attention of the board, the general board. I would totally agree.
I see Jonathan's hand is up.
Yes, thank you. It's a little complicated to explain this, but I'll be very quick. Careful, this is what I wrote in those notes that I gave you, Catherine, is do you really want to do this? If you set up a timeline, I'm trying to say first that I think the board has to have power as a board, but I don't think any one board member should have power over the board. In this case, we're talking about the first part. The board has to be powerful to represent the community and connect with the city government. In this case, if you set up a timeline that people have an option for reconsideration, for example, if you at the next meeting decide to do a CIS that we want to say something as a neighborhood council having to do with our destiny in what council district we're going to be in, now you got to wait before you send it to the city to see if there's anybody who wants reconsideration. I think you ought to be real vague on it and just say the neighborhood council, the board has an obligation to hear a reconsideration, but I wouldn't put in timelines and stuff because it may mean you have to wait in like a waiting period before you do anything. It's just
So
a thought.
I will clarify. First of all, our bylaws already have a timeline. It is prior to the next regularly scheduled meeting after the action was taken. So there is a timeline that exists already. And the board will only actually reconsider if the majority of the board votes to reconsider. And so I believe that in the past, and I can look at other neighborhood council bylaws, and I can talk to Gibson or Dunrep and see, but I don't believe there's any restriction on us moving forward with submitting anything until the reconsideration period has ended.
Yeah,
In the event a reconsideration is requested and approved and the board changes its mind or its position, then you can submit an update to a CIS. So-
yeah, I think that's an interesting point. It hadn't occurred to me, but I don't see either in the current section or the proposed change for the section that this would hamper the board. So, Jonathan,
I would ask Gibson, I'm not the authority on this. I'm just,
Okay.
in contract law, if you put out a timeline for one party, well, the other party has to abide by that same timeline and keep themselves viable for that, for the first party to react in their timeline. It's just something, I mean, I'm not the authority, but I would be very careful before I put in something like that in the bylaws. Thank you.
okay.
Other boards have a rule where, it's not just a stakeholder that can request reconsideration. It's actually only a board member that voted on the prevailing side of the matter.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I think it's good to have stakeholder input. I do think that it's been abused in the past.
Did you say you think it's been abused in the past, Catherine? Is that what you just said?
Yes, there was some
Oh,
misinformation distributed a couple years ago about a motion that was passed.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's
Ron,
fridge.
I'm gonna mute you.
Yeah.
Or you, thank you. There was misinformation distributed about a motion in the past, and there was a request to reconsider simply because someone didn't like the outcome, which, fair. Sometimes there are votes that don't go the way I want them to. It happens. I do think there is something to be said for if someone wanted to be a thorn in the side of the neighborhood council, at any time, someone could submit a request to reconsider. And that would force it to be put on the agenda. It doesn't mean we have to reconsider. We could vote down the reconsideration, but it would be just a thing that would have to be done.
I think if I'm understanding correctly, the concern would be how is it appropriate to move forward with the matter once it's voted on and passed when the possibility of reconsideration exists. And I don't see that as being a problem. But that's just me.
Yeah.
All right.
I have to say, agree with Catherine in that it's been it has been misused in the past as a way to prevent something that passed from moving, from actually moving forward with it. And it was sort of used as a tool to stall the whole thing out until the program had ended before we had a chance to be involved in it.
Can we do anything in the redrafting of the bylaws to prevent that?
I mean, unfortunately, the one that I think Kelly and I are both thinking of was one in which someone deliberately spread misinformation about what the motion was, and it created enough controversy that the board agreed to reconsider because they didn't know who to believe.
But like I said, I don't know that.
I don't know that you can put anything in the bylaws to prevent someone from straight up lying.
All right. Too bad. All right. No lies. Okay. Shall we move on to the next item? Conflicts of interest, recusals, and abstentions. Any comments?
I see Jonathan's hand.
Okay.
My opinion is that this has to be addressed. I didn't define how you go about it. I think it has a lot to do with what other neighborhood councils do. There are standards, and it doesn't take, and it doesn't it doesn't matter what our opinions are. It's legal. It's a state, it's the federal, the state, and the local all have laws, and they should be congruent with the bylaws, or the bylaws should be congruent with laws. Thank you.
I hear a lot of background noise.
That's Nick.
Not sure who it's coming from. Okay. So there are two things that I would recommend. One that I started putting in the draft is at the opening of each meeting, the presiding chair will offer a reminder of conflict of interest requirements, and any voting committee members or governing board members in that particular meeting who have a conflict of interest must make the conflict known prior to any discussion or vote and shall recuse themselves. Just basically putting in our bylaws that this has to be stated at the beginning of each meeting, just as a reminder. I know that we all theoretically know
Question?
that we're supposed to do this, but I think it's valuable to reiterate it.
I
If we don't
agree.
want to put it in the bylaws, that's fine, but maybe we put it, on each agenda and it's part of the agenda template. A reminder of the conflict of interest rules that you must recuse prior to any discussion.
I think that's good, and I think it should be in both places. Nick, did you have a question
No,
or?
it was Sean.
Okay, Sean.
So that's also incumbent that for people to actually read the agenda prior to the meeting, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Just, I wanted to make sure we clarify that because I think that there might have been a situation, if I'm not mistaken, in the past, prior to me being on the board, where this came up and it was well after the fact. And they're like, oh, and then something happened. And I just vaguely remember it. So I guess, how do we get people to?
I think a lot of people forget what exactly defines a conflict.
Not according to that thing that I just took not too long ago. It lays out it's pretty clear.
It is pretty clear, yes, but
It is painfully clear.
Yeah.
Catherine, you had a second item? You put it in the bylaws and the agenda. What was your second item?
Did I say I had a second item?
You said two things, and I think I only heard one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and then right now our bylaws do state that there needs to be a record of the notice of the conflict. I think that we need to make sure that we do that.
Yes.
Because I'm not sure that we actually are, but that is in our bylaws right now. And so I want to, it uses the word abstain versus recuse. And I think we should distinguish abstain and recuse.
Yes, we
Because
should. Those are two very different
abstaining is
things.
taking no
Yes.
position. Recusing is removing yourself entirely from the discussion.
Okay. So
It should be recused. There was nothing about abstaining. You have to leave the meeting. If it
Yep.
were like a physical meeting, you have to physically walk out. So I think that if abstain is in it, that's absolutely correct. It's 100% recuse.
good.
Yep.
Jonathan Gregory.
Catherine just mentioned what I was going to say, but I was also going to say it's down in the bylaws under parliamentary procedures in that area where it
Mhm.
talks about it has to be in the minutes. And if I'm remembering what I read, it says that you have to record someone who calls attention to their conflict. I think it just said if there's a vote, and it really should be for whenever a person has to mention they have a conflict, whether it's for the discussion or the vote, it should go in the minutes that somebody has a conflict that they announced. And there was a problem also, Tess, you remember that in one particular meeting we had, you had to ask people, other board members, it was very awkward because what Catherine suggested ought to be spoken at the beginning of every meeting, just like you open a meeting, you say what time it is, and you ought to say something about conflict of interest because it is such a big deal. Thank you.
Oh, I get it. So like at the beginning of maybe it's something just like a preamble. If there is a conflict of interest, please recuse yourself at that particular time, or is that what you're kind of getting at, Jonathan?
I think
Yes,
so,
yeah.
yes, because people don't often read the agendas and, not everybody has everything printed out. Thank you.
Yeah, and sort of just reminding people that it needs to be prior to any discussion. It's not just, oh, you can't participate in the vote. You need to, before we discuss something, you need to announce, I have a conflict and I'm leaving the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, the more buttoned down that is, the better. So as far as I'm concerned.
And it also protects everything and everyone. I agree.
It does.
I think,
It does. It does. All right. So I think we can move to the presiding chair.
Mhm.
And as currently it stands, the presiding chair may not enter into the debate of any motion before the council, except to suggest that a particular motion or second be made by a member. So basically neutral, unless a tiebreaker vote is needed. So any suggestions for updates to that?
So first off, the presiding chair is in these bylaws essentially defined as the president.
Mhm.
So it's unclear how much this applies to committees as well. I've been assuming it doesn't because the way a presiding chair is defined previously in the bylaws is the president is the presiding chair and they can delegate that if they want to participate in discussion. I am inclined to say that if we remove the power of the president to be the sole agenda setting authority, then it would warrant allowing the president to participate in discussion. I think part of the reason it's so good to prevent the president from participating in discussion is because if they are the one setting the agenda right now, as it is right now, I should say, if they're the one setting the agenda and they get to participate in discussion, that gives them a lot of sway. Whereas if they are not the only authority for the agenda, then I think it's okay to let them participate in discussion. And vote.
I think I could live with that, but I'd want to think about it.
is it worth maybe defining the position of the chair, like, with respect to the committee member, the chair of a committee versus versus the president? Is it worth maybe redefining the roles so that there's no ambiguity?
Yeah, we could do that.
So that we could just find, when the chair is the president, and when the chair is the actual committee member chair. Because the way that, and I don't have it in front of me, I'm sorry, I'm trying to do a million things at once now that I'm working. I don't remember, but I remember it being vague because it wasn't pointing out a specific person. It was kind of a little too vague for its own good, if that makes sense.
The presiding chair may not enter into the debate of any motion before the council. All right.
As Catherine pointed out, the presiding chair technically is the president. Does that mean he's the presiding chair of each committee? Or is he the...
I mean, I don't think there's any debate that we should clarify who the presiding chair is, if it's the president and or if that should apply to the committee chairs themselves. I think the open question is, if we remove the ability, if we remove the sole ability, the president's ability to be the sole person to agendize items, should he or she be enabled to debate? That's the question.
And
vote.
And I agree with you, Catherine. I think that if the president doesn't control the agenda, the contents of the agenda, then it's more comfortable to allow the president to participate, fully in debates and votes, rather than how it has been in reality for the last 8 years that I'm aware of, which is, the president controls the entire agenda and does not follow the bylaws and debates and votes.
And ignores when I point out that they are not supposed to vote.
Exactly. So, I mean, I think that
Which
seems
I want to clarify.
reasonable.
Colby does follow this.
Yeah.
This is not about Colby.
Right.
Colby
So this
does
is-
follow this.
Okay, so previous administration for the notes. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
The last two
Okay.
previous administrations did not follow this. They
Okay.
controlled the agenda and they and they debated and voted.
Well, we're not having that, are we? Nope. Okay, any more discussion on that, or should we get to the next item?
We can go to the next.
Okay, next item, moving right along, amendments to the bylaws process. I have an issue with there being a window at the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment during which we can amend our bylaws. It's not administratively, I can understand it being administratively convenient for them, but if we have something very important, I don't see why we couldn't submit.
We can't. That's just the Dunn rule. I mean, we can tell Dunn that that's a problem, but nothing we do in our bylaws is going to change what Dunn's rules are.
No, because they supersede us. I was just going to say their rules
Well,
are above ours. We'd have to get them to
okay.
change their rules, and then it would then disseminate down to the 99
Okay, Sean,
councils.
that is somewhat true, but the fact is that we are elected and they are staff. No, I'm not suggesting that we take up arms or anything. I'm just saying that, in the hierarchy of government, elected officials have more standing than staff. And this is just one of those areas where I take issue with how this has procedurally been done over the years. But I'm not willing to die on this hill. I'm just saying it would be nice if at such time we had other bylaws changes, we could submit them, not just during one window a year. But let's just move on from that.
Well, I would just add to that, just so everyone's aware, not only does Dunn set what time periods they're willing to consider bylaw changes, they also have approval over bylaw changes.
Yeah, and I have,
But isn't that how it's kind of, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but isn't that how it's designed?
yes.
Okay.
But,
I get what you're saying, Tess. I in no way, shape, or form am I'm 100% on board with what you're saying. I completely agree with you. Yes, you're not willing to die on the hill. I get that. But I think that we should pace ourselves and fry the fish we can, because this is not something we are going to, I mean,
I agree. I'm just saying when, elected officials have greater standing and, to put staff in a superior position all the time is somewhat troublesome for me. But Jonathan.
Two things. I think in this area, it probably should say that the Government Affairs Committee shall review every 6 months or twice a year the bylaws, just to make sure someone's reviewing them to see if they're working or they need to be updated. The second thing I would say is I was particularly happy with the bylaws because they served an aggrieved stakeholder. In this case, the way they were written, it was me. I went for 2 years, 3 years in West Toluca Lake, and we weren't getting any response from the neighborhood council. And then I read the bylaws and understood why suddenly it was unresponsive. And when I made a request for an amendment to the bylaws, I was shunned, and I was only by Gibson stepping in was I able to be heard. That's an example of the bylaws working, that when there's a legitimate grievance, it needs to be processed through the bylaws. And in this case, Gibson, I distinctly remember, forced that I would be heard. Thank you.
Okay. Very good. Anyway, and this is, nothing against Gibson or anything like that. I'd like to see more determination among neighborhood councils in general, and for us to have more say in our own determination. Okay, so moving on to the next item. Let's see here. Training requirements. Do we want to make any changes to that? I think.
I was proposing something kind of harsh,
What's that?
which was any council member who fails to complete the required training within 60 days of election, appointment, or of expiration of previous training will lose their council voting rights for the remainder of their term.
I first it. Oh, wait, sorry. Can't do that.
How about we put in maybe one warning, but I want it to be severe too.
Until they pass until they pass it, or just period?
Well, my proposal was very aggressive in saying if you can't get it done in 2 months, you don't get to vote again in that term.
I don't think there's anything wrong with
I was
that.
just being very aggressive about it.
Well, do we have any laggers? I mean, I know a couple people took a while.
Yeah, a month or so, but
Let's, I'm all for it, Catherine, but with a, like a 2-week reminder maybe, because, something could happen to someone that's perfectly legitimate. But I think 10 weeks is the outside limit.
Yeah.
2 months with a warning.
2 months. Let's make it. If we were to do that, I would say let's at least extend it for 2 weeks and say you get a dire warning at 2 weeks. I mean, it's 3 45-minute videos with tests that, I mean, I don't even think there's tests. So it's like, come on, you just got to do it. So I agree with you. I think we should turn the screws, but let's add that 2-week thing in there just to say screws are really turning, and then we're good.
Right. Okay. 2 months with 2-week warning. And then Catherine Hatton comes after you. Very good. That'll get the job done, Catherine. All right. So
Watch
now,
out.
what's that? Okay. So now,
Watch out.
exactly. Okay. Grievance committee and process. So I know there's been some discussion on this and grievance committee and the process. Do we need to discuss that further?
Well, Jonathan wanted to speak on this earlier, so I definitely want to hear from him. And I do
Okay.
have an additional comment.
Okay.
And I do as well. So you can let Jonathan go first.
Thank you. What I was saying has to do with the look in the rear view mirror, meaning what's already happened. But I think this discussion is we're talking about how to write the bylaws for a grievance committee. So that's what I was trying to say before, Catherine. Do you want me to talk in the rear view? I mean,
this is about if there was an issue with the way something was handled previously. I think it speaks to how we need to review this grievance committee process.
Okay, then I'll define what I see happening.
To reflect the issue.
I sent a letter to all the board members, so I won't repeat the contents, but it defined, I repeated what the bylaws say about who the grievance committee is, according to the bylaws. My dispute is that by making a proclamation that doesn't conform to the bylaws exactly as they're written, and it has to do with the annual meeting. It's not an abstract meeting that happens, years ago. My point is taken that the bylaws have to be adhered to, even when it's painful, or they have to be changed. It's the law of the land, that type of thing. When writing the bylaws for who the grievance committee is, it clearly is not a very comfortable rule in the bylaws right now. It needs to be changed in a manner that if somebody moves away or whatever, it needs some flexibility. But right now, the bylaws are clear that we don't have a grievance committee. And as long as we don't need one, we don't have an issue. But you can't just go backwards and change the bylaws to suit picking people out of the hat who used to be a grievance committee. And again, it has nothing to do with the 3 people chosen, although I do have an issue with 2 of them in what they call the duality of interest. But that's a part. This is my claim. My point here is you have bylaws. Even if you don't like what they say, we must follow them. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sean, I'll let you go first because I have a proposal.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. So the question Jonathan kind of brings up the point about the 3 people that were kind of chosen. These were just people that were kind of chosen out of a hat because of their prior experience. Is that correct?
No, they had been our grievance committee, as had been listed on agendas for a long, long time. And I brought up around the changeover that we needed to elect a new grievance committee because, A, those individuals hadn't been participating, and B, our bylaws said that we were supposed to have a new grievance committee. And I believe I did not create the agenda for the general meeting. And unfortunately, Colby wasn't able to attend. So I don't have the full information, but my understanding is the reason that those three individuals were simply put back as the grievance committee was sort of a placeholder until we could figure out how to even hold a little mini election on a Zoom. Because the public, the stakeholders are the ones that select the grievance committee according to our bylaws right now. And I have no idea how to do that on Zoom easily.
Well, I don't think you would. Wouldn't it be like similar to the way we set up the voting process, saying, hey, these are the people that we have. And it requires the stakeholders to then vote for those people, similarly to the way we all voted ourselves into power, or were voted into power, is if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yeah, the way it's set up is it's supposed to be just a thing that you do at the annual meeting where, like, you know, people in a room can raise their hands to select people, except we don't have people in a room and it's kind of hard to track that.
Okay, so then is it a possibility then for us to, you know, for the next meeting, you know, perhaps propose a motion for the next meeting that we then we are opening the, opening the gates to allow the opportunity for stakeholders to elect this grievance committee?
Well, I think that it's, well, you said you had a proposal on Catherine. Why don't you make your proposal?
I do. My proposal has visual aids.
Oh, good.
Oh, God, man.
All right. Here's my proposal. We more or less steal from another neighborhood council.
Okay.
Sweet.
So this is the grievance process for South Robertson Neighborhood Council. SuroNC.org is where you can find all of their information. And the way they have it set up is, rather than have a standing committee, it is something where when a grievance is received, then a ad hoc grievance panel will be selected from a list of stakeholders that are interested. Now, I don't know if we want to go with the exact same the secretary selects, or we say that a random name generator selects or something like that, to just make it clear that what randomly selected means. If we want to do 5 people or what, but I think it would be good to have just a place on our website where someone can submit their name to be included in this list of people to be considered for a grievance panel. And if someone is not eligible, if they lose their stakeholder status, then, you know, if they get selected, then they just don't participate. You know, we go to the next name on the list, kind of like if you get called for jury duty and you've moved, you just write to them and say, I'm moved.
I think it's interesting. I wonder, I'd want to think about that, because who is going to submit him or herself to be on an ad hoc grievance panel in the first place? And how are we going to know, even if that small pool, a random selection is taken from it? I guess it's a possibility.
Couldn't we do it? It's kind of like a substitute teacher situation. We have a pool of people that are willing to do it, assuming that we can even create a pool. I honestly have no idea how many constituents would be willing to be a part of it. I mean, like, for example, Jonathan, would that be something you'd be willing to do?
Actually, this is what I had recommended in my notes to Catherine. Catherine, thank you very much for finding this in another neighborhood council. I think this is really good. What happens when a grievance is received, obviously someone's passionate about some wrongdoing in their mind. And suddenly there are interested parties that surface because it's a dynamic item that someone's filed a grievance over. So suddenly people start to bubble up who would make a robust committee. And that's why I really like this, is by selecting your grievance committee a year out or something. You got people who moved away or died or aren't interested, whatever. And by doing it like this one does, is it bubbles up and you get people who are interested in the matter. I like it. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments on this as a proposal? Again, we don't need to copy it exactly if there are things that we want to see a little bit differently. Right now, for instance, our grievance committee is 3 people as opposed to 5. And considering we are a pretty small neighborhood council, we're the 3rd smallest by population. I don't think it would be unreasonable to have a slightly smaller grievance committee if chances are we do not have a extensive list to draw from to serve on it.
Can I ask you again, that was from the South Robertson Neighborhood Council. What's the URL for their neighborhood council, Catherine?
It's on the screen at the top, Soro, SORONC.org.
SORONC.org.
I don't know why I'm pointing to it with my finger on the screen.
Okay,
I'll
good.
point to it with the mouse.
Excellent. All right, good. Well, you know, I think I brought this up last night when I think an issue of correcting or amending the meeting minutes was brought up. And the secretary said that people could find the meeting on YouTube, whereupon I suggested that the URL to our YouTube channel be included on the agenda. And I don't know if it's going to end up that way or not, but it would be, you know, letting people know that. And since we only have 8 subscribers to our YouTube channel, I think it would be useful. And I think I sent you a short link last night to it, Nick, did I not? Nick Baker.
Nick's muted.
Okay, Nick, did you get my short link yesterday
To what?
to the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council YouTube channel?
Yes, I did.
Okay, with 8 subscribers.
Yes, with 8, big 8, big
Yeah.
OCHA.
Yeah, so, I think if, you know, and this is something I know Outreach is working on, if we get that out there more, we're gonna see more people hopefully participate. So anyway, I think we can move to the next item unless anybody
Okay.
has further questions. Okay,
What do we have?
So I guess my question at this point is, it is 8:11 right now.
yes.
Do we want to keep going and cover standing rules proposals? Or do we want to do something a little more general and just ask if people have comments on any of these items specifically? And if not, close the meeting.
I think the second item is more
Okay.
expeditious.
I'm just gonna quickly read out for everybody some of the things that we were discussing, putting in standing rules. And once I finish this list, if anyone has comments on any of these items, please go ahead, raise your hand or speak up. So the list is detail the timing and procedure to agendize items, setting special meeting and ad hoc agendas, define how council liaisons are appointed, define annual meeting procedures, votes, vote splitting and ties, disclosure, outreach reporting, metrics, engagement, attendance, and regular reporting requirements for the outreach reporting, email access, and key holders, which includes our storage, mailbox, and any office or meeting spaces once we are back in person. And if there are any other things that people are requesting be included in the standing rules.
Can I speak here?
Yeah.
Okay. There was a lot of things there, and nothing particular came up for me except when you talk about the email access. And think I put that on my notes to you, Catherine, a while ago, that I highly recommend that the neighborhood council take a very firm stand that there should be no deletion, and it should be for the use of neighborhood council business only. To say anything else that people can delete, but not in the last 2 weeks of their tenure or things like that, I think are funky and hard to enforce. But truly, it's a email service solely for the benefit of the neighborhood council, and no one should be using it for anything other than that. And no one should be deleting anything that they engage in business. In other words, everybody knows, don't make an email. Anyways, I'll cut it short. I just don't think there should be deletions allowed. And I don't think there should be any time. People should be, the minute they're not a board member, they're off. There's no recovery time to cleanse it of anything. There should be nothing in there that people need to cleanse. Thank you.
I have a comment.
Sean?
So this was brought up a long time ago, and I don't know if this is still applicable or not. As of now, do we know if there's any old members that are still have access to the Gmail? Kind of what Jonathan was saying. Is there anyone that has access to the Gmail account as of now?
No,
Okay, so everyone that was is no longer.
correct.
Ask and answer. Oh, go ahead.
The only issue I have with any of this is really, there's a tremendous amount of work that we do, some of us, and I'm just thinking at the end of it, if I wanted to go back and find something, I feel like that's something I should be able to do for a little while, right? I mean, I've gone back and looked up emails from 5-6 years ago for business and stuff. And like, I'm not saying that it's going to happen with this. And once you're not on the board, you're not on the board. And that certainly does change. But it concerns me a little that there could be some communications and deleting emails within 2 weeks after changing over to a new board. You know, it's like, oh yeah, that was in my email. I had that really good answer for you, but now I don't. And there's literally nothing I can do about it. So I that's the only thing that concerns me with going and just wholesale deleting email accounts. Unless those emails are archived and stored somewhere because they're a matter of public record, which I'm not sure that they are or aren't. But that's really my biggest concern. I know that there's that tendency to say, you know, we're not pay for it anymore, but I do know that these are records, and that there's a lot of stuff that some of us do that's important, and you know, I mean, use it as records, and I don't know. It just feels to me like there should be a way to archive it or something. I don't know.
I have a question. Is it really public record? Because
I don't know.
You can't.
I don't know.
I don't think it is, because if we were like, for example, if like when Jonathan was kind enough to send everything out to the entire board, the minute anyone would have replied to it, it would have been a string, not a string. What's that poll? Not a poll. Excuse me. I'm
Brown
A
Act.
serial meeting.
serial meeting. Thank you. I don't know why tricks came to mind, because maybe that was a serial a long time ago. So I apologize for that. But having said that, you know, if you're going to be moving from your apartment and you know that you're going to be leaving on the 1st of the month of, let's say, January, and it's now November 15th, and you know you're going to be out of the house by January 1st, you're not going to forget to pack all of your stuff and be out by the 1st. Because at the end of the day, if it was really all that important, you could take that email and forward it to your personal email. And again, Nick, I'm not coming down on you. I'm just saying I'm kind of playing the devil's advocate at this point, just to kind of put it out there.
But you have no idea what can be important 3 months from now. So I mean, you could have some email in there, and you're like, oh yeah, I know the exact answer to that.
Well,
Right.
So
Go on.
I'm going to say a couple things very quickly. The first is it is public record to the extent that I believe someone can request certain information, but Dunn doesn't provide any guidance. And I have asked them, you know, what the rules are on whether or not we can delete emails. You know, I spent a long time not deleting anything from my inbox, including, you know, newsletter emails from Metro LA, because I was just paranoid about having deleted something, you know, but her emails.
You're a good human.
And I eventually it was just like, I am so sick of having all these stupid things in here that I'm deleting them. But, you know, I do know that Dunn has not given guidance on that. And that's something I believe we need to get done to make decisions on. And if it's something that we need to keep records for a certain number of years, they need to provide us with that guidance, because I do agree with Nick that if there's something important that needs to be retrieved, like here's what someone's response was on something, it'd be good to have access to it. But there's also absolutely no rules in place from Dunn on how to do that.
Well,
Right.
I will say that I was not aware of any rule not to delete emails. I mean, I delete emails.
There isn't.
Okay.
There is not.
So I think to address Nick's concern, having a window of time, you know, to do whatever you need with your email after your board membership term ends is certainly possible. And I will also say, yeah, your emails are a public record. A person cannot request wholesale access to your email, but they can make requests, keyword search requests on this and this topic, or related to this and this subject or person or what have you. So, but that also applies to your personal emails at this point, because if you are discussing business matters, neighborhood council matters, even in your personal email, that can be the target of a California Public Records Act request. So it doesn't matter what the medium is, it's what the content is. So Kelly?
I would just say that historically, it has been more of a problem having people who are no longer on the board having access to emails than it has been people that are no longer on the board not being able to get into.
Yeah, and I would say I think I'm with Sean on, I don't think you need access to your email after you're no longer on the board. But I do believe that there should be some period of time after a board member departs in which maybe that stuff continues to be available in case there is a records request. And Tess, I don't know if you know off the top of your head how far back records requests can go. If it's something where it's like 2 years or 5 years, that's a little different. But if it's like within the last 6 months, you know, we can just budget to keep some email addresses open for 6 months.
I actually have looked into this relative to the city clerk, and there is a schedule of record retention. And I believe for email, it's 2 years, but I will double check. So
Okay.
because the city and the state, the government is required to retain records for a period of time, and different records have different retention lengths of time that are required. So anyway, so that's general. I will also mention one other thing with respect to the Brown Act. A reply to an email like that, Sean, Jonathan sending all of the board members an email. The Brown Act, I think, is very frequently misunderstood and misapplied. A serial meeting occurs when a discussion is had about something that should be agendized and publicly discussed, but that doesn't mean that board members or committee members can't exchange a word or two or three. The whole idea of the Brown Act is transparency, so that all decisions and deliberations related to decisions are made in public. That is completely transparent. And I think we've generally seen an overabundance of caution with the Brown Act that is not always warranted by the letter of the law. But, you know, it's good to be careful. So.
I agree.
All right. So I think with that, can we close the meeting, Catherine, or we have a question from Jonathan?
Yeah, before we do close, I wanted to mention also to Catherine that in my notes, I had mentioned that in order to understand what the duties of each officer in the board is, what the duties are, you have to read the entire bylaws. It's all over the place. In order, it's not just, anyways, what I would recommend is stripping the duties of the 4 officers out of the bylaws and putting it into standing rules so that you can maneuver them as you wish to, if you want to add or subtract and do it comfortably without the city. I don't know why they're in the bylaws so much if you're going to have standing rules. We didn't have standing rules before, so that's why they're in bylaws. But I would recommend that. Thank you.
That's interesting. Is that possible, Catherine?
I have no idea, but I think it's certainly possible to create broader definitions for each and then create more specific individual responsibilities and standing rules. Like, for instance, the secretary is responsible for maintaining minutes for the general board meeting. And then in the standing rules, we include information about what the secretary has to do with regard to record keeping and, you know, producing the newsletter and whatever else, like, or, you know,
but here.
I think we need to have some definition of those within the bylaws, but it doesn't necessarily need to be super specific. And we could clarify and collect that information in the standing rules.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Any other comments?
The only other thing that I wanted to add is in what I am sort of proposing for this, when it comes to a standing rule on vacancies, including in here some of the information about how the notice needs to be done and how people can submit for consideration. Like the actual process of that, like it has to be posted on GTLNC.org and included in all newsletters distributed during a 30-day application period, you know, whatever it may be, but defining that here as opposed to in the bylaws.
Okay.
Just so that if it's something that needs to be changed, it can be.
Yeah, I think I can live with that. That's great.
All right. Anything else on the standing rules? Any requests for things to be in standing rules that are not part of the list that we went over? All right. And I believe, just for everyone's edification, what the vote splitting refers to is some neighborhood councils allow people to run as sort of a ticket. For instance, if 2 people wanted to be a committee co-chair team together, you know, they might run to be co-chairs of a committee. And if someone were voting, they wouldn't vote for one or the other. They would have to vote for both of them. Like their vote would be for, you know, Abigail and Rosa or for Joe. And so if someone wanted to vote for Joe, they couldn't also vote for Rosa. They'd only have to vote for Abigail and Rosa as a ticket or Joe as an individual. Like,
And so
I'm
you're
not explaining that very
advocating
well.
we-
I'm
you're
getting
advocating
tired.
that- Catherine, you are advocating that we enable that or disable that.
Enable that so that, you know, if we go to a process where we elect our committee chairs, that there wouldn't be confusion about, you know, everyone gets to vote for one person and whoever gets the most votes is the committee chair, in the event that 2 people like you and I want to serve as co-chairs. So you could just run together. And then
Okay.
people couldn't say, well, I want to vote for one of those, but not the other one. You'd have to vote for the pair.
Okay, so then to vote for Tess and Catherine would be just one vote.
Right.
Okay. All right. Any comments on that from the folks here?
I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
All right.
I will just say I've looked up the records retention schedule of the Los Angeles County 2019 email retention. Depends on what the content of the email is, but it's from 2 to 6 years. So, and that's the county.
Yeah, I think we need to get guidance from Dunn because in the past, all I've heard from them is, no, there's no rule. You can do whatever you want to with your email. You can delete stuff. It's fine.
But I was going
Which
to
is-
ask, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, does it depend on the level of government that they're referring to?
It might. It very well might. And of course, I do want to stress to everybody, we are volunteers. We are not city staff. We are not paid elected officials. We are all volunteers. And we don't have the same capacities that, you know, the city of Los Angeles has to do records retention. We just don't, like, realistically.
I get it.
Yeah. I know we need to close the meeting, but I do want to highlight here, we received a request to write a letter of action requesting city council support for legislation removing the statute of limitations for prosecuting or bringing civil suit for individuals that have committed elder abuse, including financial
That was Lee.
abuse. Yeah, Lee requested this at our last meeting. I think that it would be an interesting thing to make a request for the city to take action on. I do want, and I haven't had time to do this, so I apologize, but I do think we need to look into whether or not this is something that exists within California or within the county already, or if there is any sort of Los Angeles City Council motion or file, city council file already related to this.
I
Before
can
we simply
actually,
do a letter of action.
I can actually answer to this because I have knowledge firsthand.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, my father suffered from dementia before he passed. And there was a situation where he was kind of out of control, and my mom took him to the emergency room. And my mom had bruises on my shoulders because my father was he was a very confused individual, and he was under dementia or under the mishaps of dementia. And he had bruised her arm just in a fit of rage. And my mom was very easily bruised. And when they got in, one of the doctors looked at my mom's arm and asked the question simply, did this happen because of your husband? And he said, yes. And they pulled her aside and they took this so there is something that's out there for elder abuse. Now, to what degree, because what it is criminally, I don't know. I just know in my case, it was a situation because of the condition my father was in. It got routed down a different path because he was not in all of his faculties. But had it been a situation where he was in his faculties, the police would have been called and everything. Because I actually asked the doctor about this.
So this is not necessarily in that direction of, if someone is like a domestic violence type of situation. This is more when someone is taking advantage of an elderly person who is without their faculties. I'm sure you've heard about the way that conservatorships have been abused.
100%.
Yeah. So this is more about that direction of taking advantage of someone or elder abuse in relation to not providing adequate care to them when they're in a nursing facility or something like that, or providing bad care. It's more in that direction of elder abuse rather than identifying potential issues of domestic violence.
Catherine, have you spoken to Lee at all about this? I know he's brought it up at one or two meetings, but has anyone spoken to him about
I
this?
haven't talked to him beyond the meeting.
Okay. Maybe someone should call him and ask him about this. I can take this on in a couple of weeks, but not in the very near future.
I think that's great. We're not going to vote on it at the upcoming meeting
So the question is, does any legislation of this nature exist already? What exactly am I asking him and researching?
If he has specifics on what he wants us to request, and he did, if you go back and listen to it, he laid out a little bit of basically eliminating a statute of limitations.
Okay.
So,
so that suggests that there's already legislation. Okay. All right. eliminate statute of limit. And that was at the last general board meeting, right?
Correct.
Okay. Last, okay, good.
All right, before we close, is there anything else for new business or anything that you would like us to, as the Governmental Affairs Committee, look into or work on? Jonathan, I see your hand up.
I didn't say this earlier, but it's kind of important. I saw this play out in another neighborhood council meeting. It has to do with talking politics. I agree with Catherine. Don't use politicians' names. What happened was another neighborhood council voted on a CIS, and it was political in nature, which is fine. You can be political, but one of the board members said to the other people, "What are you people doing? You're alienating all of these people and getting nothing done." It's something to remember before you get political, is that there's an automatic alienation because we're a divided society. So Catherine, that part I didn't get said, is that you want to be pronounced. I think describe the council district that works for Toluca Lake, but don't use the politicians' names. Thank you.
Nicole?
All right. With that, we will close the meeting at 8:34 p.m. Thank you all so much. Have a lovely evening, and fingers crossed that we can have some, apologies for the motorcycle, that we can have some red line versions for review by our November meeting, which will be on Tuesday, November 2nd at 6:30 p.m.
Okay.
Thank you
And
very
See
then-
much.
y'all then.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great night,
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody. Have a great evening.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.